Hey guys, this is Mrs. Lyons. I'm just going to take a few minutes in this video to walk us through the solubility curve practice so that if you're not sure how to get to one of the answers or if your answer doesn't match mine, hopefully this will help straighten out any confusion. Okay, so we have our solubility curve. On our x-axis is temperature, our y-axis is the solubility of the substance. And remember, it's in 100 grams of water. So that will become important a little bit later as we look at some different types of questions. Okay. So basically, if we look at number one says when 80 grams of sodium nitrate is dissolved in 100 grams of, this should say H2O, what would the temperature be? Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to look at 80 grams. We're going to go up, we're going to find 80 grams on our solubility curve, and we're looking for NaNO3, which is right here. Okay, so basically what we want to do is we want to go at 80 degrees and see where we cross that line for sodium nitrate. And when we get to that line, that's the saturation point. So that's the maximum that will dissolve. So if I follow this down, that is going to be at 10 degrees Celsius. Okay. Number two, if 90 grams of KNO3 is dissolved at 30 degrees, what would the saturation be? So this one, I'm going to look 30 degrees. I'm going to find my point. Okay, so 30 degrees, I want to go up to 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So 30 degrees, 90 grams. What is the saturation of KNO3? So where is KNO3? So KNO3 is this line. Okay, so this line represents the saturated solution of KNO3. Since our point is above that line, that means that it's going to be super saturated. All right. It says, how many grams of KCl would you be able to dissolve at 10 degrees in 200 grams of water? Okay, so this is one of those where this 100 grams of water comes in. So we're going to look at 10 degrees Celsius, and we're going to find KCl. So let's see, here's the line for KCl is right here. So if I go 10 degrees KCl, so basically what this says is that I can divide 30 grams in 100 grams of water. Okay, so in 200 grams of water, how much could I dissolve? So 100 times 2 is 200. So we would take this 30 times 2, and that would tell us that we can dissolve 60 grams of KCl in 200 grams of water. Okay? Number 5. Number 5. Which compound is likely a gas? So if you remember when we took notes, we said that gases, the solubility of gases decreases as the temperature increases. So to find a gas, you'd want to look for the compound where the slope is going down. So if you look at this line right here, Ce2SO43, that is going to be the one that would most likely be a gas. So Ce2SO43, because the line slants down. All right, if you dissolve 30 grams at 90 degrees, so the very first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look up 90 degrees, 10, 20, 30 grams. Okay, so that's the point. Now I'm going to look and see what it's asking. How many more grams of NaCl can you add to make the solution saturated? So what we'd want to do is find our line for sodium chloride, NaCl, and take it over here. And the saturation point is where it hits the line. So at 90 degrees, it would take 40 grams to be saturated. This is saying we have 30 grams, okay? So we would need to add 10 grams, okay, in order for it to become saturated. All right, let's see. At what temperature could you dissolve 35 grams of sodium chloride and potassium chloride? So this one's kind of a weird, it's weird what it's asking us. So first I'm going to look for 35 grams, and then it's asking both sodium chloride and potassium chloride. So I'm guessing that those two lines will cross at some point. So at 35 grams, sodium chloride, here's potassium chloride, here's sodium chloride. So at 35 grams, it's going to be right about here. Oops, right about here where those two lines cross. So I want to see where sodium chloride and potassium chloride cross. I'm going to say it's right about 30 degrees. Okay, so whenever it's asking you for two substances, you're going to look at the point where those two lines cross. Okay, which compound would make a saturated solution when 70 grams is dissolved at 90 degrees? So let's do 90 degrees. I'm going to go up 60, 70 grams, and I'm right on the line there of K2Cr2O7. Remember, the line on the graph is where the solution is saturated. Okay, so I keep forgetting to move my paper up and down. All right, what would be the saturation of 30 grams of KCl at 60 degrees? So first I'm just going to find that point. So 60 degrees, 10, 20, 30, and it was asking us for KCl. So KCl is here, right? So that's under the line. Under the line means it's going to be unsaturated. Okay. Last question on this page. Which compound is the least soluble at 50 degrees? So what you're looking for when it's asking you least soluble, most soluble, least soluble is going to be the line closest to the bottom of the graph, because that's the minimal amount of grams that you can get to dissolve. The other thing you'd be looking at is most soluble. Most soluble would be whatever's up here. So for this question, it says at 50 degrees Celsius, what is the least soluble? So it's going to be this, the line that you come to first. So in this case, it's going to be Ce2, SO4, 3. So cerium sulfite, okay, is going to be the least soluble. Okay, so let's flip the page over. All right. So we have a new solubility curve. All right, and we have about 10 more questions. If you wanted to dissolve the same amount of HCl and KCl into a saturated solution, what would the temperature be? Okay, so this is another one of those where it's asking us, it's saying, I want to know where both of these are soluble. So you're going to find a place where the line crosses. So I'm going to find HCl and KCl. So HCl is here, KCl is here. So I want to see where HCl and KCl cross. Okay, so that's going to be right about there. And I want to know what temperature. I'm going to say about 75 degrees Celsius. Okay. If you dissolve NH3 into a saturated solution at 10 degrees Celsius, how much could you dissolve in 500 grams of water? Okay, so we've got 10 degrees, and we're looking at NH3. Where's NH3? Oh, here's NH3 up here. So NH3 is this line, okay? So if I have a saturated solution of NH3, it would be at a temperature of 70 degrees, or 70 grams, sorry. 10 degrees, it would be a mass of 70 grams. So I can dissolve 70 grams in 100 grams of water. So this is asking us in 500 grams of water, how much could we dissolve? Okay, so this one you've got to think 100 times 5 is 500. So 70 times 5 would be 350. So when you do that type of problem, you're just looking to see how many times 100 we're doing, and that will, then you'll multiply your amount dissolved by that same number. All right, what would be the saturation of 100 grams of KNO3 at 50 degrees? So 50 degrees, we want to know 100 grams, 90, so 100 grams, and it's asking us for KNO3. So the line for KNO3, the saturation line is here. Our dot is above the line. That means that's going to be a supersaturated solution. Okay, let's see. Which compound is the least soluble at 10 degrees? So again, we're going to look at 10 degrees. We're going to look at the line that we come to first. So what compound do we get to first? Let's see, what line is this? KClO3, so potassium chlorate would be the least soluble at 10 degrees. All right, if you wanted to dissolve 80 grams of sodium nitrate in 100 grams of water, what temperature should the solution be to make a saturated solution? So 80 grams. I'm going to go over here and we're looking at NaNO3. So NaNO3 is here. So 80 grams of NaNO3, all right, it's going to be right there. We want to know how many grams can you dissolve. I'm going to say approximately 12 grams, okay, give or take. So if you said 11, if you said 13, I would count those as correct, okay. Number 16. If your water is at 70 degrees Celsius, how many grams of KClO3 can you dissolve in 100 grams of water? So at 70 degrees, we're still looking at KClO3. So up here, KClO3 is right about there. So I'm going to say that's about 36 grams. Okay. So anytime it asks you how much would dissolve, you're just looking at the line. You're finding the point on the line. At 50 degrees Celsius, which compound is most soluble? All right, so that's number 17. So if I want to know most soluble at 50 degrees. So I'm going to start 50 degrees. I'm going to go all the way up to the top of the graph. Now, in this case, I would accept one of two answers, okay? If you go to the top line on the graph, that's NaNO3. The other thing that you could assume, since this potassium iodide line, since this line is all the way up in the corner, you could assume that if we extrapolate that, it would be more soluble, okay? But if we're just looking at the graph, we would say that NaNO3 is the most. So I would also accept potassium iodide for that. All right. Number 18, if 20 grams of potassium nitrate is dissolved at 30 degrees Celsius, how much more solute can still be dissolved to make a saturated solution? Okay, so let's look at that. 20 grams at 30 degrees Celsius. So 20 grams at 30 degrees Celsius, and we're looking at KNO3. So the KNO3 line is here, okay? So if I want to look at the difference between, so I'm going to say this is about 48 grams would be saturated. And then I'm going to subtract the 20 grams to get the difference, and that gives me 28 grams that I could add to form a saturated solution. Okay, so I had 48 would be saturated, and it's telling me I've already got 20 dissolved, so I would do the difference, give me 28 grams more would dissolve. All right, which three compounds are likely a gas? So remember what we said, gases are less soluble at higher temperatures. So our gases would be the lines that have a downward slope. like HCl, NH3, and here this one goes down SO2. So our three gases would be HCl, NH3, and SO2. Okay? All right. Let's see, last one. My paper's all wonky. If 70 grams of ammonium chloride, NH4Cl, is dissolved at 50 degrees, will it be saturated, supersaturated, or unsaturated? So this is straight up, let's just look at the points on the graph. 70 degrees, 50 degrees Celsius, or 70 grams, 50 degrees Celsius. Okay, so that's our point right there. And it's asking us for NH4Cl. All right, so let's see, where was my line? 50 degrees. So my line is here. NH4Cl is down here. So this would be a supersaturated solution. Okay, guys, so that is just kind of looking at that solubility curve and seeing what we can figure out from that. All right, I hope that was helpful. I will see you in class. Take care of yourselves.